Hello. This is multi-line project. Just wait a few minutes as people come in. But today I want to talk about languages I've learned before, and I've been very busy this week. I think I'll wait to talk any more about that until some new viewers show up. Hello, welcome to my stream. I know I did put up a game, but that's because I didn't really have much time to prepare. I will mostly focus on the language stories. The game is just background, just as entertainment. But yeah, normally I would provide like make a slideshow or something, but I felt like that would be too academic if I did that for this topic. So I just made a list, and then having a game as background noise. So how was everyone's week? How was everyone's week so far? Mine has been quite busy, and that's part of the reason why I wasn't able to. Yeah, not bad outside of a particular powerful storm in my area on Monday. I hope you're doing okay. I didn't have any crazy weather where I am, but it was extremely windy for the last 2 days, and I don't know where exactly you are, but it might be related to that. I feel like whatever was causing the super strong winds where I was probably meant that there was some pretty bad storms going on elsewhere. Even for me, I was like trying to get my food, and I nearly got blown away because I'm a small person. So I nearly got blown away by the wind. Almost lost my hat, and my food was going crazy. I was so worried that something would like, because my food was like mix of stuff. Like there was like some pork and some sides, and I felt like the sides and the main dish were gonna like mix up together in the container because the wind was blowing it. But uh, luckily it didn't do that. But I was so worried about it when I was walking outside. It took me 20 minutes to get back home after doing that. So it was like I went out at 1 o'clock and then was back at home by 1:20, and I was just like, what is happening? Like why does usually like a 10-minute trip took me 20 minutes because of the wind. I was just like, nope. Hello, Anita. How are you? How was your week? Oh no. Oh no. I think I heard about this something somewhat happening to my friend who's in Canada, and she lost power too. She's like on the eastern side of Canada as well. And so she didn't have power, and I was like, "Are you able to keep warm at least?" And she said she covered herself in blankets. I hope you're able to keep warm. I don't know if where you are is particularly cold, but if it is, I hope you're keeping yourself warm with the power outage. I'm doing well. Thanks for asking. How are you? Yeah, I've been pretty great. Spent most of my week like catching up on my studies and preparing for some tests next week. I have two tests next week and then another one the week after. So just been very busy. And speaking of that, I won't be streaming any games after this stream. I know most of you don't even watch anyway, but which is fine. But I won't usually do a gaming stream like right after my multi-lane project stream, but I won't be doing that today because I really do need to study for this test. It's coming up on Monday, But yeah, it's been pretty good, and I hope I feel confident with the test. But it's not my first test of the semester, so we'll see. And that's pretty much it. So it's been 5 minutes, so I'm going to start talking about the different languages that I've learned through my life so far. And as I said before in some other videos, I am a Korean American. My family immigrated here when I was quite young, so uh, it's kind of confusing whether my first language is Korean or English, because technically it's Korean, but when I was in kindergarten and I was doing the second language program, English as a second language program, I learned a lot of English, and my parents were very anxious about me like fitting into America and doing well at school, so they made sure that my sister and I learned English, and so they spoke English at home as much as they could because they didn't want my sister and I to be behind in any way. Because at that time, now research has shown otherwise, but at the time the research was showing that showing exposing your children to a lot of different languages at once can be confusing for them. And so they didn't want that to happen. So they spoke in English at home. So I eventually just lost. Yeah, I'm also Generation 1.5. Yeah, same. So I eventually lost most of my knowledge of Korean at a young age. So I spent a good portion of my time, especially from adolescence onward, to learning. Oh, what did I do yesterday? Anyway, relearning Korean. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely been a difficult journey because like part of me is like I should know this and I did know this, but it's like really hard for me to learn it. And for especially when I was younger, I was very not motivated to learn because it was just so hard. And I mean, and it was so deceiving too because like when you learn Korean, as some of you might know, the written language itself is actually very easy to pick up. So like when you look at the characters, it's like really simple. Like all you need to know is how to read each character and how to form the syllables. It's so easy. If you watched a video where I talked about the creation of Hangul, it was made to be very easy. Even if you like just know the characters, you can use it like a secret code or whatever to make your own words up and stuff because the sounds and the letters are very like intuitive. And so it's like for me it was very easy to learn at first, and so I was like, oh, this is gonna be fine, I can catch up. But then it got more difficult because like there's different rules about dropped pronunciation, and then of course like the words themselves are already hard to pick up because a lot of the words are based off of Chinese characters, and that Chinese characters aren't easy to learn, as some of you might know. And so it's like, oh my goodness, how am I gonna be able to like learn Korean? And when I was like around 10 or so, I was kind of just gave up. Like I just kind of did it for show for my mom to be happy with me. But most of the time I was kind of like, I don't want to do this. Like, what's the point? It's too hard. I have other things to do. But I started watching. Good evening, Tomda. How are you doing? It is the afternoon where I am, but I'm pretty sure it's evening where you are. So yeah, I was talking about how I learned Korean. So when I was in like elementary school, late elementary school, I kind of just gave up on learning Korean and didn't really put much effort into it. And then I discovered K dramas. So like I knew my parents watched K dramas, and I was like whatever about it. But I started watching it myself, and I don't even know why. I just like got really interested in knowing K dramas. I'm sorry for my island's mess, by the way, because I'm trying to like recreate. Um, yeah, I'm doing pretty well, thank you. Yes, très bien, merci et toi. Yeah, I'm doing pretty well, thank you. And so, what was it? So I discovered K dramas. I knew my parents watched K dramas, and I was fine with that. I was like, whatever. But then I discovered an actor, I think, that I became a real big fan of after I watched a movie that he was in when he was quite little. And so I became a fan of his and decided to watch the dramas that he was in. and I got hooked. And I think the first drama I watched was Warrior Baekdongsu, which is Je teste ton niveau du français. Oh my goodness. I think you're testing my knowledge of French. I'm not that great at French. I've learned some stuff, which I'm gonna go and talk about my journey of learning French. Oh yeah, I do have to follow rules sometimes on addressing elders and older relatives, like my grandparents and my first cousin, who's 2 years older than me and is male while I'm female. Yeah. The nice thing is though, when I was very little, I was very good at picking up the what's called the nopunmal or jondaemal. It was used to be called jondaemal, but I think they call it nopunmal now, which is like honorifics that you would use when you're talking to your elders or just people who are older than you. I'm pretty good at doing that because that's like the first thing that I learned from my parents. So it actually comes easier to me than like the Najinmal or whatever. I forgot what it was called. Yeah, the more casual speak is actually harder for me. With K-dramas, I still have to watch them with Korean subtitles. Reply series is one of my favorite series. Yeah. So like my first drama that I watched was Rory Baekdong-soo, which I did not recommend. It's a very trash drama, but I loved it. And there's still some episodes I still go back to because some of the episodes are really great. It's just the overall story is very poor, especially after like a certain point. After the midpoint, it just kind of gets really dumb. But yeah, and then I watched Great Queen Sunduk, which I do recommend if you can sit through 60 episodes of drama and history, but it's very fun. And I watched that by myself with my sister, and that was really great. And I did use the English subtitles on Viki at that time because Viki had it. But I don't really trust English subtitles anymore. Now I know more Korean. My brother even calls me the masculine form of big sister at home. He's done it all. He call me Hyung? Because like, some regions of Korea actually do that though. Like they don't use 언니 and whatever. Or 누나. They just go with Hyung. Like everything's Hyung. If you're older, you're Hyung. But in like mainstream Korean, which is like in Seoul Korean, which is very similar to the French system, by the way, Tomda, where in France they have like a set national dictionary, and in Korea they also do something very similar where they have a standard like Korean national dictionary, and they determine like the different rules. So like France had their own like, what is the gender of COVID-19, the word COVID-19, and so they decided that. And Korean kind of has the same thing, like what word are we going to use for COVID-19 in our Korean vernacular? So it's very similar. So officially you would call them Nuna. He uses Nuna with you. Okay, that makes sense. So like at least he doesn't call you Hyung. He calls you Nuna. My sister calls me Unni, even though I'm only like 1 minute older than her. So, yeah. Oh, the whole life he's done it. Yeah, I mean that's just how it is. Like my sister still calls me Unni in Korean. And she doesn't call me by my name unless we're speaking English. In which case we do. But yeah, and I'm only 1 minute older than her, and I use it to like lord it over her. It's fun. Tu as un très bon niveau, ne t'en fais pas. Malheureusement, je ne vais pas pouvoir rester. Je dois réviser mon italien for mon examen de lundi. Yeah, okay, so I didn't get everything you said, but you said you have a test on Monday for Italian and you need to have some rest, which I totally understand, because I have a test on Monday as well. So yeah, good luck to you. Yeah. So yeah, that's my story with Korean stuff. And now that I've watched a lot of Korean dramas and listened to a lot of Korean music, which I don't listen to K-pop anymore. Not because it's not, I think I'm too, like, whatever. I just don't have time to keep up with the different personalities anymore. Which makes me feel really old. But, like, even with BTS, I was like, I kind of knew BTS was a thing before they became really, really big. But I never really listened to their music. I was kind of like, whatever. Because, like, I'm still a hottest. I'm still into 2 p.m. even though they're, like, taking a break or maybe never come back, but whatever. And so I was just like, oh, whatever. And then I still follow IU, and that's pretty much it. Like, I don't follow anyone else. And for K-dramas though, I've been very steadily watching a lot of K-dramas, and not recently because of school. But I did watch One of my favorites that I watched like fairly recently was Six Flying Dragons, which is a historical drama, which is actually written by the same people who wrote Great Queen Sundok, by the way. So I've been following those writers for a very long time. The only ones that they wrote that I wasn't a huge fan of is Arthdal Chronicles, but some people like it. It turns out a lot of Americans like it, and that's available on Netflix. And Six Flying Dragons is also available on Netflix, but only on UK. So if you use a VPN, I highly recommend watching it. It is 50 episodes, but it's very good. Like unlike Great Queen Sunduk, where it's like good for 50 episodes and it lacks like 10 or like ugh. But in Six Flying Dragons, like the entire show is just beautiful. Everything from beginning to end. The first two episodes are kind of slow, but that's pretty much it. Same with me, especially as I have anime and video games among other things to focus on. Yeah. Yep. I mean, right now I'm doing a video game, I'm just running around in circles. In Finland, we have to study Swedish because it is our second mother tongue. I mean, that's fair. I mean, I know like a lot of countries, they have like English in their curriculum as well as multiple languages in the curriculum, and I kind of wish that in American school they at least like enforced having people learn Spanish, which I mean, I'm speaking like, you know, being a little bit of a hypocrite because I didn't learn Spanish at all, like at all, except for through Dora. But I feel like it's becoming more of a common language in America, and that's like important for us to like know how to speak Spanish. So yeah, so I think it's important to have multiple languages in your belt. But yeah, that's my story with Korean, and I'm still learning more and more. Like I haven't achieved like a level of mastery with it yet, but I've definitely become more diligent compared to when I was younger. And I kind of wish that I had put more effort to it when I was younger, because I had time at that time, and I also like had the brain plasticity to learn a new language at a much faster rate. Even if it felt slow for me at that time, it's definitely would have been a lot faster than what I'm doing right now. So yeah, that's lesson learned. Like if you want to learn a language, learn it as young as you can. And then Latin was the next one that I did, and this one's a bit interesting because my high school did have a Latin course. Okay, I can't do it there. My high school did have a Latin course. I would have wanted to learn Korean at school. I always hated that it's never offered in America, but at least I don't have to hear bad pronunciation of it in school. Multiple languages is very, very important. It's basically a life skill. Yeah, it is a life skill, and there's like a stereotype about Americans not knowing anything other than English, and it just has been a negative like image of Americans for quite a while. And though when you do meet American who can speak multiple languages, that's not from an immigrant family, it is very cool. I definitely give props to them. And I've met many people who do take that extra effort, which I think is very great. And I think it's even more popular among people my age. There's more of an effort to be more culturally aware, which I think is great. So yeah, I learned Latin in high school, and I chose it because this is funny. I chose it because I didn't have to learn how to speak it. So I already explained like how I was already trying to study Korean, and by the time I entered high school, I was a bit more open to it. Like I started watching K-dramas and stuff, but I was still kind of like I know how hard it is to learn how to speak a language. It's already hard for me to learn how to speak Korean. So I just don't want to deal with that with a whole nother language, okay? So I'm just going to do a language where I don't have to learn how to speak it. But also, and the other more like better reason for it is that Latin is a foundation for a lot of different languages, especially Romance languages, and even English itself in some ways. And at the time, I was still entertaining becoming like a doctor, which I'm trying to work towards right now as well. And so I was like, oh yeah, Latin is very important for like medical terms too. Though I have since learned that Greek is actually more of a thing in medical terminology, but whatever. So I studied Latin in high school, and it was a very interesting experience. Like I will say that my teacher was pretty informed with Latin, but he had a very interesting personality. I don't know if I want to get too much into it because I still pretty much liked him as a teacher in general, but very interesting person. What can I say? Like he had a very like frugal lifestyle, like him and his wife, and they only had like one like one utensil per person in the household. So like if there were four people in the household, they'd only have like four plates and like four spoons and stuff. Because like what's the point of having extra stuff? Was the mentality. And I don't know if this was true, but there was like a rumor in my school that he didn't even have a refrigerator, which I don't think is true. But it was funny when he was talking about how he just bought a computer, and I thought that was hilarious because he's like really, he was just really behind the times. And some people thought he was Amish, and I was like, no, he's not Amish. But yeah, that was a very interesting Latin teacher. But he was very like informed on Latin as a language. He'd studied it all his life, and yeah, that's pretty much it for Latin. I did get up to all the way to the level 4 of Latin, and I took the AP test and got a 4, which the highest grade you can get is a 5. So I think I did pretty well with Latin. But if you give me like a text in Latin right now and tell me to translate it, I will not be able to do it for you. I don't remember much of Latin. I just remember a lot of like the root words, but as far as like tenses and stuff, don't know. I didn't do it myself, but I knew the Latin teacher because he was a coach for my high school academic decathlon, and I was in the team since my sophomore year of high school. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, Latin teachers are definitely like interesting personalities. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, thanks. But I haven't retained most of what I learned. It was definitely a difficult road, but the nice thing about AP Latin is that what was really funny with my high school AP Latin class was that we kind of divided the class into people who will take the AP exam and plan to take it, and people who just like are taking it for the credit. And so I think it was like 5 people in my class who were, signing up for the test, and everybody else was just like, just taking it to get that 4th level. But yeah, and so those people just could just chill for most of the class. It was really funny. Like those people were just chilling for like class, and then me and my sister and a few other people were like studying for the test. And that's when I discovered Shmoop actually too. I don't know if it's still around, but it was like SHMOOP, and they provide a lot of like tutorials and tests for the AP Latin course. And so that's how I used to study for the exam. And what else? And it was a lot of fun for me because I really love Greek and Roman myth, which is another fun part of the Latin classes that you get to talk about Greek mythology, Roman mythology. And so like in Latin, AP Latin, you had to read Virgil's Aeneid at that time, and there was one other thing. What was the other thing? I don't remember. I don't think I read it very carefully. But I remember reading Virgil's Aeneid, and it was a great story. I loved reading it, and yeah, I used to be able to recite like the first 2 lines, but not anymore. I don't. Was it Arma Rumque Cano, and that's Caro, whatever. It was like one of those. That's the first line, but that's pretty much all I remember. Yeah, the myths are always interesting, and I feel like I was like one of the things that my parents exposed to me at a very young age, even though technically it's like an 18 plus content. Like, let's be real, it's like not for kids. But they did give me like a children's book version of like the initial myths, so I knew about like the 12 Olympians and like different stuff. And then I read Percy Jackson, which as a kid I didn't really like. What's your favorite mythology god or goddess? Mine is Apollo. Apollo is definitely one of my close favorites. He might even be my favorite. Let me think. See, I don't really have like a favorite. I do like Ares and Aphrodite as well, which is like my personal bias because I do like how their romance relationship. But Twilight Princess, your message was retracted. I think you might have done that on purpose, but just to let you know. So yeah, that's would be one of my favorites as well. I just know that my least favorite of the Olympians is Athena, and I don't know why. Yeah, they do a lot of 18 plus things, yep. I don't know how my parents were, like, protecting me from so many different things, but with Greek myth, it's like, here's a book, read a book about how Zeus was cheating on his wife and got multiple kids out of marriage. This is totally important for you to know. I mean, it is important for you to know as far as, like, understanding Western culture and the different allusions that different writers make, but like, because when I read Shakespeare, I understood every reference to like Jove or like different Greek myth references, but it was just kind of like, why did they let me read this when I was like 8 years old? But yeah, I've been a fan ever since, and now I'm starting to like try to diversify my mythology knowledge from like Greek to other stuff like Egyptian or Indian or even Japanese or Korean. Like my parents were like very open to me learning about Greek myths, but Korean mythology, nothing. They don't teach me anything. I think it's kind of an element of like they're from my mother's from a Christian family, so it's kind of like it's more real to them because they like are still live in a society where people like believe in those things, and it's like they don't want to expose me to like bad religion or whatever. But and while Greek mythology is like basically dead, I mean there's still a couple of people, believe it or not, who like still worship those gods, but in general it's basically dead, a dead religion. So yeah, they weren't as like about me learning about it, and it's important culturally. Yeah, and then I did try watching the Blood of Zeus cartoon that's on Netflix, and I think it's good. Though my friend who finished watching the first season told me that they kind of veer off the mythology at the end of the first season, so I'm nervous about it because Hades is also one of my very big favorites, and I feel like they made him into a villain in Blood of Zeus, which is my biggest pet peeve when they make the god of the dead like a devil. I'm just like, why? The god of the dead is not the devil. That's not how it works in mythology. Yes, he didn't cheat on his wife either. He's like a pretty cool guy. I don't know why. It's like the Christianization, which I'm a Christian and I do believe in Christianity, but it's like, as far as like Greek myths are concerned, don't bastardize it with Christianity. Like that's its own thing. Like the God, Jesus, devil thing is its own thing, and you don't like conflate that with Greek mythology and have like the god of the dead be the devil, because that's just not how it works. Like that's not what it is. It drives me nuts. Where is the balloon? I'm like in the shadow, but like I don't see it. Where is it? Where did the balloon go? Oh, there it is. But yeah, Hades and Chion's wife. That's why he's my favorite. He's my favorite of big three. And then Poseidon, and then Zeus is like dead last. But yeah, that's the fun of Latin class, is to like learn about Greek myth and Roman history. And it was definitely a lot of fun knowing about all those different emperors, because when I was reading The Trials of Apollo by Rick Riordan, I already had a prediction of who was going to be the big bad, and I was right because I knew my Roman history. But yeah, it's a lot of fun as far as like the history side of things. Yeah, that's all my story on Latin. Unless you have other questions about how I learned Latin or what other experiences I had, that's pretty much it. And then the next language I learned was French. And I actually learned French in high school as well. We didn't have like a French teacher, so I actually learned French in online, which is very interesting thinking about what's going on right now. The fact that you learned these myths for the first time when you were 8 with Arenos' death and Kronos following his kids. Yeah, I think I did learn that too when I was 8, but I don't think it was that graphic when I read about it. So like it just said, oh, they like rose up and like killed her. I mean, I guess I thought it was okay because I was already reading like the Bible, and the Bible is pretty graphic too. I was reading that like at age 5, so I mean I didn't get everything that was going on in the Bible, but if you like take a look and read what happens in there, especially in like Genesis, it's pretty weird. Okay, so like it's considering that like the level of Greek myth is about the same, so I guess that's why they were like okay with me reading it. But yeah, I took French online in high school, which is very weird looking back because now everybody's doing the online experience. And at that time, it was like a special thing whenever you like if you're like excelling well in class and you want to do something extra, you can take online classes for your enrichment. And so that's what I did. And it was something that I wanted to take French because my dad was a French literature major in college, in his college days, and so I was already deeply interested in French. So I studied French in high school, and it was online, and all I remember was like recording myself speaking French and sending it to my teacher, and she would grade the recordings, and she said I had a cute accent. That's basically what I remember from doing French in high school, because we didn't really do many class interactions and stuff. It was all online. Most of the stuff was asynchronous is what people call it now. At the time, most online classes were asynchronous, and yeah, that was interesting. So I was definitely like pretty ahead of the time. So I had a very very long history of doing online classes. So this pandemic happening and me doing online classes for my program right now. It's like, okay, I've done this before. I know what to expect, kind of, and the good and the bad. So it's kind of like, okay, I know what to expect. And so I did French in high school online. And that was an interesting experience. My dad learned German in high school, and if my high school offered German, I would have chosen that. Yeah. See, if my high school offered German, I would not have chosen that. Because like it's so hard. My dad did study German as well. He studied a lot of different languages actually. But like uh, German is just hard to pronounce. Like the vowels are very interesting, and there's also a lot more like tenses and articles than in English, and also I think they still have genders as well. This is very very confusing for someone who's trying to learn it. And then, I mean, French also has their things too. Like they have a lot of tenses. Tense is a very important thing in French. So it's like you can get like this really obscure like verb, and you go like, "What tense is that?" And it's like it's imperfect, plural-perfect thing, and it's like, "What is that? What does that mean?" Because English doesn't have that many tenses anymore. I think they used to, based on what I've learned. Yeah. Even the dialect used in Germany. Yeah, did my dad learn it? But I don't know what you're asking. I don't know if my dad learned the dialects, but like there's definitely a lot of dialects though, based on what I've studied. I remember doing a lot of like deep look into yeah, it's hard one to use die, das, der, den, dem. Yeah, all the different articles, basically. So like with English you just have the and and that's it. Which is kind of like the French where you have and le. It's like that. But so in French you also have la because of the un because of the gender. But other than that, it's like you basically have two basic things. When in German it's like five or so. Like it's like what? How do I know what to do? My brother took a minor in German. Yeah. Yeah, German is. I actually have an appreciation for German language now, though, because like after my sister, did, vocal lessons in college and learned lot of different beautiful songs, in German, French, Italian, Latin, English, Spanish. They all can sound beautiful in when sung. And for the longest time, if you look at the traditions and the you know theories of the day, a lot of people didn't believe that German could sound beautiful in song, believe it or not. And so I think Schubert, as well as some other people, were like, oh no, we can make German sound beautiful in song. Like, you Frenchies don't know the potential of our language. And so they definitely made a lot of different beautiful songs that are sung in German originally, and it's really good. So, yeah, don't underestimate German and the poetry of German. My dad learned the dialect used in Germany and not the ones used in Austria, Switzerland, Liechtenstein. Yeah, I mean, that's that too. I remember when I was doing research for my multi-language videos, which I've made mistakes with them, but, you know, I did try to, like, figure out, like, what's the differences between these different countries. I know, like, in Disney, they don't really differentiate between dialects. Like they're gonna just do one German dub, and that's what's gonna be shown in all German-speaking countries. But I kind of wish, but I also understand why they don't do like the whole different dialect thing. But it would have been nice to get that difference though. But it was interesting getting like looking at the musical edits that I've done, where you have the Viennese recordings and the like Hamburg or some other German city um, recordings, and you see the differences in the translation. Like there's like a different way of translating the same line from the English original. So it was very interesting, and I definitely appreciate when I could do things like that. Because you can get the difference in like dialect and culture just from the translations. And the only thing that's kind of similar to that is with French and Canadian French, which Disney does do. Disney also does Castilian Spanish and Latin American Spanish, and I think they also do Brazilian Portuguese and European Portuguese. So they do differentiate between those because they're different enough for it to matter. But with the German, they just do one German dub, and they call it a day. So, yeah, that's definitely something that's interesting too. Looking at dialects and like the history of language, it's definitely interesting. But yeah, German is definitely a beautiful language. I learned most of the basic of German I currently know from Italian fan fictions. Yeah, how did I learn? See, I'm gonna get into the next part, which is Old English, and that's how I picked up some German. Because I remember one time, I didn't expect this to happen, but I'm getting a little ahead of myself. But when I studied Old English in college, and I read a lot of Old English and had to like sort of translate a lot of it, and I was learning a lot of it too, that I've basically lost most of what I learned. But at that time, I was like really thinking about it and really learning how to translate it. And then I went to my sister's choir concert, and they were singing a German song, and I could pick up like every 5 words what that meant, and I was like, this is scaring me right now. How is Old English so similar to German that I can understand like every 5 words what they're singing? So I was just like, this is creepy, but also like really cool how like similar Old English and German was, and how much that proves that English was originally a Germanic language, and in some ways it still is. And even with all the different like romantic influences that came after, it was originally Germanic, and it was similar enough that I could understand some German words today. It's definitely not the same language, there's differences, but it's just like, wow, I can understand some words. Same thing here for Italian. I learned some basic Italian, learning how to sing operatic arias, yeah. South Italy. Um, I mean, Italian too is something that I can kind of understand, but it has like a different uh thing to it. I don't know if it was like mixed with like the vernacular of the region, which is very interesting. So like with French, as we talked about, French is a romantic language, but it also has influences from different Germanic tribes that lived in the area, and so you have like the French doesn't really sound. Sometimes it sounds almost Germanic, like some of the sounds in there, like the way you pronounce your H is very like harsh, and the R's as well. And it's kind of like, okay, this is not like Latin. So there's definitely some Germanic influences, like Frankish influences. I think French people will kill me if I say that, but you know what? It's true. And so it's like, they have it mixed with the vernacular, and that's expected. Same thing with Spain and Spanish, it's mixed with the vernacular. And so it's not quite like the same as Latin. But Italy is very interesting because Italy is the center point of the Roman Empire. But if you really look at Italian and Latin, it's kind of like there's some similar points, but it's like, what? Like, how is it? I feel like Romanian, if you look at Romanian, it's actually more similar to ancient Latin than Italian is. And I'm just really baffled by it. I haven't found an answer for it. Maybe because I haven't done much research into it. But it's like, wow, how did that happen? So yeah, that's just an interesting point I wanted to make, is that Italian is, it has evolved from Latin. I don't know exactly how. And Romanian is actually more similar to Latin than Italian is, which is weird. But I was just to live with it. It's just a fact. Yeah. What is KK doing? He's probably gonna tell me to wait to give him a song. Okay, KK. I will not time travel to 6 p.m. Just kidding, no. Yeah, sometimes I've done that. Ecclesiastic Latin pronunciation is similar to Italian. Yes, it is. Yeah. Makes you wonder, like, is ecclesiastical Latin actually more similar to how it was pronounced because it actually does sound similar to Italian, or what? Like, it's hard to piece together the puzzle pieces, but it is what it is. So, yeah, so I jumped the gun a little bit when talking about me learning Old English, but I've studied Old English. I need to go back. So, some of you may know this, especially if you studied Old English before, is that J.R. Tolkien, the author of Lord of the Rings, was also an Old English scholar. He was a professor in Old English, was very passionate about it, and even translated Old English works. So I was a huge Lord of the Rings fan and still am. And so when I saw that my college offered an Old English course, I was like, I am taking this class. Like, I am taking this class and learning Elvish or whatever. And so I took the class, and it was like the closest thing to learning Elvish is learning Old English. So I took the class and I learned a lot of Old English, and it was actually a lot more than just a Tolkien class. And though we did end up talking a lot about Tolkien, but also like, oh yeah, have fun walking your dog. I hope your dog gets you and you get the right exercise you need. But yeah, anyway, the Old English thing is interesting. Like I said before, it definitely shows like the Germanic origins of English, and also shows a little bit of already starting a little bit of the history of conquest of England, and not England conquering, but England being conquered. So like a lot of Vikings would come and basically harass England, and so there's a lot of adoption of different Scandinavian vocabulary, a lot of like Old Norse vocabulary and Old Danish vocabulary. So yeah, so there's that influence as well. I mean, it's kind of hard to notice because it's all Germanic and it's all under Germanic umbrella, but there's you can tell though, like when it's like, okay, that sounds more like Old Norse than it does like Old German. So yeah, I mean, it's just like that was interesting, and also learning about the culture of the day and the medieval history. So now I feel like I've learned a lot more about like English medieval English history, because when I was younger, I basically only really learned from like Henry VIII onward. I feel like I think I can list each monarch from Henry VIII. And then I read Shakespeare, and I could go back as far as like Richard the Lionheart, I believe. But that's pretty much it. But like when I studied Old English, I got to learn more about different early medieval English kings and the different culture of the time and the different stresses and like cultural landscape of that period. And it was very interesting, and I definitely felt like I came back with a more deeper appreciation for the English language and language history, and it was cool. Um, so yeah, and my professor was really cool. He was also like a big Tolkien fan, and was also a big Old English history fan. And I read a lot of like Old English poetry and writings, and including Beowulf. We spent a lot of time reading Beowulf, and it is right now. It is the I think I did write make a video about this in one of my videos about English, and it's the oldest like existing manuscript of Old English that we have right now. And the interesting thing about it is that it's not about English people at all. It's about Scandinavian people, and it's about this lost like group of people called the Geats, and that's the origin of the name for Jutland in Denmark. But those people are long gone now, so it's just the Danes and the Swedes, which who also appear in the yeah, your brother read in school. Yes, the Danes and the Swedes also appear in the epic, and it's definitely a good read. But it also has like some historical backdrop and like references to manuscripts and histories that no longer exist, which is kind of sad. But it's really all we have about that period, along with some other poetry, but they date later. So yeah, that's interesting. There's also like the idea of like the tension between paganism and Christianity. So if you read a lot of Old English stuff, sometimes you read something and it sounds like a pagan story, right? Just not like pagan in a negative way, but like it's you know going over like this old folk tale or whatever. And then suddenly you see this like random interlude of like praise God and some biblical verse or something, and like no, it doesn't have a timing issue. It just kind of just is there. And people haven't questioned timing. People have more like questioned like what the gaps are because we don't have all the information. Because it's like, oh, what are they referring to? Because we don't know what they're referring to. That's the only thing. Like otherwise, like as far as like the historicity of the manuscript is fine, and also we don't like consider it like a history. So like when they talk about historical events in the story, we don't take it like a historical account. We take it as a folk account of a historical event. So it's not like we're reading it like it's a chronicle. So there's that too. Yeah, Baal can be compared to Jesus now in many ways. Yeah, but like that's the question too. Like, were those religious points like added afterwards, or was it like originally part of it? And that's another debate too. Hello, Marshall. Okay, I'm gonna tell you right now, Marshall's my favorite villager in Animal Crossing. I don't care he's the most popular. I just like him because he's cute. Okay, I'm gonna talk to him. No, Marshall, you gotta tell me more than that. Oh, Marshall. Yeah, I mean, he can be a Jesus figure, but at the same time, he's kind of an asshole. Like, I don't. I personally don't like Beowulf that much, but at the same time, that's like a trope of the time where you write an epic. This is the difference between writing an epic and writing a romance. When you write an epic, the main character isn't supposed to have flaws. Like the main character, um, yeah, I think it's like it's a orally passed down tale, so the likelihood of there being older manuscripts is pretty low. It would have been cool if we could like go back in time and actually like listen to an actual recitation of the story and record it ourselves, but that's impossible, and probably would cause too many problems if we could time travel anyway. But yeah, the likelihood of there being older manuscripts is pretty low because it was an orally transmitted story. Um, well, what was I thinking? So, like, the thing about epics and romances is that in epics, the main character, the hero, is supposed to be kind of like flawless in a way. Like they're kind of like a Gary Stu or Mary Sue, where they like can do no wrong. They're super strong. They have all these like great like things that they've done in the past, just like fine, and they can still fail in the story, but eventually they prevail. It's always about like a normal person or someone who has flaws who have to like answer the call and like they don't have much of a choice in joining on this adventure, and so but they do it because it's the right thing to do, and then they fail and they have flaws, and then they like either win or they lose tragically. With epics, it's kind of like you seek it out yourself, kind of like it's not like Beowulf is just like living in this farm and someone comes up to him being like, oh, you have to do this. No, it's literally just like him going to a place where he wasn't necessarily invited, though they do appreciate him coming and saying, I'm gonna help. So, you know, yeah, I don't want time travel to be discovered either. That would be really bad. Oh no! Oh no, someone's sick. I need to go and check on him. So that's my experience with Beowulf. I wasn't a big fan of Beowulf as a character. I thought he was annoying. But it comes with the story. I didn't include Middle English, but I also learned Middle English in college. I read the Canterbury Tales and some other Middle English works. like Marie de France, which is one of the very first female poets in English. But she actually wrote in England, in English court, but she also wrote in French, and she wrote some interesting stories as well. So I do like. Um, what was I thinking? I do like her works as well, so I highly recommend reading her works. She's actually the one that wrote the story about the guy that can turn into a werewolf or something, and then he wasn't a bad person though. He just like had a wolf form and a human form, and he told his wife like not to like figure out what he is, but she found out anyway, which is like fine. But then she like betrayed him and shit, so like he ended up like getting revenge against her. So it was an interesting story. I think it's called Bisclave or something. It's pretty popular among werewolf fanatics. A lot of people who like werewolves know the story, and she was the one who wrote it. So it's an interesting fairy tale, and I definitely enjoyed watching it. Was it during the full moon? No, I think no. It's literally like at night. At night, he turns into a wolf, and he cannot turn back into a human at all unless he puts his clothes on. So like so when he's a wolf, he like takes off his clothes and leaves them like at this certain place, like hides them. And he's like a wolf at the night, and he'll go back during the day when he can turn into human, but and get those clothes back. But his wife betrayed him by like hiding away the clothes where he can't get them, so he was stuck being a wolf. And then she married somebody else that she wanted to marry, and then the wolf like got found by the king who was going hunting, and almost got killed by the king, and the people that were hunting, in the forest. But then the king was like, "This one is acting very respectful towards me, and this is very interesting. So I'm just gonna keep the wolf alive." And then the wolf got really angry when his wife, who was cheating on him, like came to court, and so the king kind of figured out what was happening because of I think the wizard that lives in this court, and so like the wizard was like, "Hey, you need to give this man some clothes," and so like the king gave the wolf clothes, and the wolf became a man again, and then the wife got punished. The way she got punished was very interesting. Like she got her nose like cut off, and and then she was banished, and then the legend has that her descendants all have like missing noses, which I thought was interesting. I was like, oh, that's not how it works genetically, but yeah, that's the storyline. Oh geez, the mindsets of medieval people. I don't know what you mean. Like for me, I was still on the husband's side because like, I mean, it's kind of sad that she was put in an arranged marriage, but like, there's no point acting like a mean person to your husband just because he turned into a wolf at night. Like, there's a way to deal with it where you don't do that. So I was just like, okay, maybe it would have been better off to like tell like I don't know somebody locally and be like, hey, my husband's a witch, and like prove it to them by showing them him turn into a wolf and like have him be killed or something. That would make more sense than like hiding away the clothes. But I've seen weirder stories in modern fan fiction. Yeah. But yeah, this is a very famous like werewolf story called I think it's called Bisclave. And Marie de France wrote it. Yeah, that's my experience learning English. Like, older Englishes. And then I did interesting about medieval English class is that it spanned from actually spanned from Old English all the way to John Milton was the border point, and you'd have to take another class to get the rest of it. But I didn't take that class. I did take a class on Victorian English novels though, so that was interesting. So Milton was where I left off as far as my like chronological journey into English. And Milton is also very interesting. Paradise Lost. A lot of people misunderstand it, mostly because of Mary Shelley's take on it on Frankenstein, and I actually disagree with Mary Shelley's take on it. And though I love Frankenstein, but I'm just like when she read Paradise Lost, I don't know what she was reading because that's not what I got from the book, like at all. But whatever. But it could just be my own biases. Like for her, she's not a super devout Christian, so reading Paradise Lost, you might get one interpretation of it. Well, for me, I'm pretty Christian. And I also understand John Milton too was pretty Christian as well. So it's kind of like, where did she get this message? When John Milton himself probably wouldn't have agreed with it. But whatever. It's just, I mean, she can get out of it what she got out of it, and still made for a very great like Frankenstein story. So whatever. Anyway, lastly, and I'm gonna go back to French. I studied French in high school, like I said before. I did it online, and then I took French again in college. And luckily, I tested into the first level, so I didn't have to go to an upper level French class I wasn't prepared for. I think an interesting thing about the French department is that they're very, very aware of like how learning worked, and so they knew like even if you had some exposure to it before, if you're not like at a certain mastery level, they weren't comfortable putting you in a higher like level, which I was totally fine with because I was not prepared for like level 2 at all. So I took introductory French. And I've told some of you this before, but the interesting thing was that my French professor, looked almost exactly like Italia France. Like, there is no denying, like, how much he looked like Italia France. And I was just like, what in the world? I was, like, literally just, like, started getting into Italia, and I kind of want to separate my anime life with my real life. Don't want to be a total weeb, you know? But, like, the level of self-control I had to take to be like, oh my god, you look just like Italia France. Which I ended up never telling him that, which is good. But I was just, literally the entire time I had him, both semesters, I was just like, yeah, I've said that to some of you. So I was just, he literally did look just like France, though. I don't know if the height was the same, but, like, the blonde hair, the eye color, the fact that he had like stubble on his chin and the ponytail, I was just like, what is going on? And I told my sister this too, and she was like, what is happening? And she saw him, and she was like, yep, you're right. This is weird. So yeah, that's the story. My last story for French. Yeah, do you guys have any like stories? It's like a really short stream. It's only been an hour, but have any questions for me or any stories that you want to share? You know what? I'm gonna do something that's really. Did you already go over how Shakespeare is not Old English? No, I have not gone over how Shakespeare is not Old English. I have talked about it in one of my videos, but one of the things that I I don't know why it's a pet peeve of mine. I feel like it's kind of mean for it to be a pet peeve of mine, but it's kind of annoys me when people talk about Shakespeare as if it's Old English, because it's not. It's early modern English. Old English is Beowulf. Shakespeare's early modern. And if you really looked at Shakespeare, there's a lot of like commonalities with the language in Shakespeare versus the language in modern day. And some of the words that he's come up with, like swagger and stuff, is like now it's still in modern use. So that's very interesting. And right, my switch just turned off, so while it restarts, while we wait for that. Yeah, I'm just really bored, so I'm doing Animal Crossing in Korean just for kicks and giggles. So yeah, Shakespeare is in early modern English, and one of the ways to really get that experience is to actually watch a performance of Shakespeare. I think most people I've talked to, when they watch Shakespeare, they can actually understand what's being said. But oh my gosh, 3 types of Korean. I mean, what do you mean? Because I know, like, What do you mean by 3 times Korean? 'Cause I know that my parents talked to me about how they had to learn the language that was spoken in. I did talk about Hanja like very briefly. They had to learn the language and memorize and translate the Hunminjeongeum. Some of you might be aware of this, but I did talk about in my Hangul video or my Korean alphabet video, where there was a writing that was done by the king at the time. And it was called Hunminjeongeum, and talking about like explaining the alphabet and stuff. But the language in it is so old that it's not actually transferable to modern Korean if you like actually read it literally. So yeah, my parents had to learn all of that. So yeah. Yes, Holocron is where it's at. If you don't know what Holocron is, it is a movie version, like a more like a mini series version of Shakespeare, spanning from the Richard II play all the way to I think Henry V Part 2. So it's very good. I think they continued that with the Henry VI series. I don't remember what that was called, but the reason why I watched Hollow Crown is well, I mean, Twilight Princess is Korean American. I'm also Korean American, so we've learned a lot of Korean. Yeah, Korean from the 15th century, modern Korean, and I think literature. Yeah, literary Korean, especially from like the even in the mid 20th century, is different sounding than now. So, and I guess there's also like, I have, there's also like different writings from like earlier. So if you look at like Silla time period or like Goryeo time period, the writings from that time are like a bit different in language. Yeah, there's Hanja too, like Chinese characters. But like our parents' generation didn't learn Hanja though. Like my parents' generation didn't learn Hanja very well. Like it was kind of there in the beginning and they kind of just stopped. So yeah, it would be like 15th century Korean for the Hunminjeongeum. So you Nala and Sami, all that great stuff. And that doesn't make any piece of sense now. At the time, they was called China based on like reading the Hunminjeongeum that I've looked at. They called China at the time Jungweek instead of Jungkook. So it's some interesting stuff for sure. And if you look at people have criticized Hangul saying it's very limited with the sounds that you can capture with the letters. That's a very uninformed opinion because there's a lot of like obsolete characters in Hangul, which I didn't have much time to get into in my video before I wrote about Hangul. But there's a lot of obsolete characters that can capture a lot of different sounds, and if you look it up, there's so many, so many more vowels, so many more character combinations, and even whole new characters altogether that could capture all the different sounds, and that's not in use anymore because people don't really pronounce that in Korea. But you can still use it for your own, like, alphabet if you want to use it like a secret code. So, I think people underestimate the amount of work that was put into it back during a time when people could actually, pronounce all those different sounds, which in Sejong's time, in 15th century time, people had a lot wider range of pronunciation, and I feel the same way about English too. When you look at Old English, there's a lot more of a pronunciation range that they had in those days. Like, you would pronounce every single sound, and that's like, you don't drop letters in your pronunciation. But not anymore. You drop letters all the time. He's just like, during this time, I play according to my will and desires. I have a funny story about Hanja in my Mandarin class. Oh, really? Yeah, because President Park basically abolished Hanja for like a hot minute, and then realized that was stupid. Where's Marshall? Is he outside? I moved all the houses to the beach, so maybe I should check on the beaches. No. One of my classmates was Korean and knew Hanja really well and used that knowledge for when we learned Chinese characters. Okay, that's cool. And whenever the teacher asked for students to translate the Mandarin words, oops. Okay, I think that's Rosie's house. Oh, that's Rosie. And whenever the teacher asked for students to translate the Mandarin words, the student would give the answers to his friend in Korean, while I'm over here understanding everything. So, if you notice here, I changed my switch language to Korean just for kicks and giggles, and you can look at the characters here, and it's like kind of intimidating, but once you learn like the different sounds that they make, it's pretty self-explanatory. But the problem is like understanding what it says once you like sound it out is the hard part for Korean. Where is Marshall? Oh, there he is. Wow. Junie. So in Korean, Marshall's name is Junie. Yeah, the names are different, and also the catchphrases are different. So like in what does Marshall say? Does he say smug? No, he doesn't. I forgot what he said, but he says "어차피" in Korean as his catchphrase. Yeah, I know his name is Junie. He says, "Oh, sorry, I was in the middle of appreciating nature." Sulky. Okay, that's what it was. Sulky. I was in the middle of sighing. Can I not talk to you? So he's talking about the Happy Home Academy. Chloe's like, sulky. Okay. 그러고 보니 내일 아침은 해피홈 아카데미의 평가 발표가 있겠군 어차피. 후후후. 그대는 본인을 드러낼 준비가 되어 있냐? 난 언제든 보여줄 각오가 되어 있다고 주니님의 모든 것. Basically saying he's ready for Happy Home Academy to inspect his house. Coincidentally, when I played Super Mario 64 for the first time, it was a Nintendo DS remake and in Korean because I played a Korean version on my uncle's DS while visiting Korea 10 years ago. Oh, that's cool. I'm like carrying a net but not interested in, yeah. What language should I do next, guys? It has to be a language that I understand. So it's only French, English, and Korean are your only options. Oh, look, it's Kit. Whatever her name is in Korean. Some of the names in Korean I don't like. Like, Rosie's name was like Bouquet or something. Like, what? Bouquet? Also, what? Applique? Applique? Like, what is that? Like, it's supposed to be like Africa, but like not? Like, what is that? I like how the nickname that she gave for me is still in English. Imagine if Latin was an option. she's happy to talk to me whenever. She calls me Pujak in Korean. What's Pujak means like little sprout. That's kind of cute. She calls me child in English. She's also talking about happy home. She's thinking about rearranging her room. Most of them are not transliterations at all because the game is originally in Japanese. So a lot of the Korean names are transliterations of the Japanese names, but are not transliterations of the English names. So the English is, either a translation of Japanese or a different take on the Japanese. So if there's any similarity between the Korean and English, it's really by coincidence because most of them are, based on the Japanese names. Because this is originally Japanese. We could try Japanese, but like I know very very, very little Japanese. I haven't talked about Japanese in my list of languages because I never formally studied Japanese. But I'm a big anime watcher, and I basically only watch in sub. And if I do, and even if there's an English sub, I would watch that. But normally, I'd actually prefer a Korean sub because Korean sub is generally a little bit more accurate because languages are more similar, believe it or not. Even though they're not in the same language family, but they are still similar because of geographic, closeness, proximity. So I prefer Korean sub to over English sub if that's available. And I almost never watch in dub because it just gives me. I'm one of those fans. I'm one of those anime fans who just gives like the dub a look of horror. I just go like, what? I remember Demon Slayer was finally available on Netflix, and one of my gripes with it is that the English sub isn't a subtitle of Japanese. It drives me nuts. And not only that, like when I first opened it, it started playing in English, and I was like, what is this? I cannot listen to that, so I changed the language to Japanese. So yeah, I'm one of those people. I'm pretty visceral about it. The only thing that I don't do is express my opinion on Twitter because Twitter doesn't need my opinion. But yeah, I have pretty strong feelings about dub versus sub. If you do like dubs, that's fine. I also watch Hatalia and dub, which I talked about before. Yeah. For Chinese and Japanese, I rely on English subtitles, and when reading it, I need to rely on romanization. Oh yeah, I mean, Japanese romanization is actually very good though. Like they've done a really good job with their romanization, and part of it is just like the nature of the Japanese language, where they have limited pronunciations anyway. But still, it's very very well organized and well designed. Korean romanization, on the other hand, I have no idea who made that, what the logic behind it is, and if someone was just basically mixed. Because if you look at it, there's no logic to it. Like even if you follow a particular yeah, I do watch Italian fairy tale and dub. Yeah, I watch Italian and dub and sub. I think nowadays before I used to really like it in dub, but I feel like now I'm probably gonna watch it in sub because I'm not really in the mood for all the dirty jokes that happens in the dub, and the sub is kind of less on that, and I kind of want to watch that now. I feel like I'm too old for the dirty jokes, so I'm gonna be a boomer and watch the sub. But yeah, when I was younger, I definitely liked the dub, and I did like Black Butler in dub, even if the British accents were horrendous, because it still felt a bit more immersive than the sub, because it takes place in England, and having English characters speak English, it just felt more right. But normally I'd watch it in sub. Yeah, I hate Korean romanization too. There's no logic to it. A lot of it is because it's based off of different languages, pronunciations of different Roman characters. So it's like, what is this? So yeah, I don't like it, and I also don't like Pinyin. But I think Pinyin is actually consistent because it's based off of a particular country's pronunciation of different Latin characters, even if it's not the English pronunciation of them. I still hate it though. But yeah. And I still would recommend to anyone who wants to learn Chinese or Japanese or Korean to not rely on any form of romanization to actually learn it, because especially with characters, especially with Ganji or Hanja or Chinese characters, there's a history within those characters, and once you learn the radicals, you'll be better at learning how to read those characters and try to suss out what those characters mean once you learn the different elements of it, so that the different radical elements of it. So yeah, the radicals. When I say radicals, I mean the different building blocks within one Chinese character. So once you learn that, you definitely develop a higher mastery of those languages than if you just learned romanization, because the romanization is going to be a crutch and it's not going to be good. So it's fine if you want to obviously romanization is fine when it comes to translating names and stuff, but as far as learning the language, don't rely on romanization of any kind. The only purpose in knowing Pinyin, though, is that it's easier to type Chinese if you know your Pinyin. I think that's the way they type the characters, because there's no way to make a keyboard of all the different characters that exist. I mean, I guess you could use the Taiwanese system that uses the different radicals to build a character, but yeah, I think Pinyin is still a pretty reasonable way of doing it, too. Okay, I'm gonna pause the stream for a few minutes because I need to do something, but I will be back. So I'll mute my mic and then I'll be back in a couple minutes. Okay, I'm back. I'm sorry about that. I feel like Marshall is singing, and I don't want you guys to miss out on it, so I think I'm gonna add. Where is the. Maybe it's not available. Oh, is it not available? Okay, it's fine. Thanks. I don't think I can add the sound from the game, but yeah, that's. Where did we leave off? Thoughts on how Japanese annexation affected the Korean language. I mean, there's not really much to say other than, there was a period of time when people weren't allowed to speak or learn Korean, and there's a chance that a lot of pronunciation ability of the population kind of got decreased because of Japanese. But I mean, that's only a theory. I don't really haven't done any like sound research on it, so I don't want to say anything that's like a fact. Yeah, there's not really much to say other than like the typical imperialist cultural genocide that they were attempting at the time. And all I will say is that well, Korean eventually won out, and it's still being spoken today. Like it's not the same for many other languages out there in the world, including a lot of Native American languages, a lot of them which are lost. And I'm saying Native American very generally, but technically we're talking about each individual tribe. So a lot of those languages are lost, and so we don't know. Like speaking of Pocahontas, for instance, we don't know what language she spoke. Like we know a couple words, I think, but like in general, we won't be able to like know what she said from her language. So like that's an example. So that's a lot of dead languages, a lot of lost languages, and it's still a problem. So that's that. That's only one example out of many. Oh yeah, that's another thing I was gonna mention too with like studying English is that to say something for in England where like for the longest time and still kind of today where people are trying to get rid of other languages like for the longest time the English government was like, hey, you can only speak and learn English, you can't learn Welsh, you can't learn Scotch, you can't learn Irish Gaelic, like none of those languages are allowed, you're only gonna learn English. And that's just like that. There's a long history of that happening, and only recently it's kind of allowed. But even then, like, there's still some people who are like very closed-minded and don't want people to speak other languages. So, yeah, language is a very powerful tool, and for the longest time, a lot of countries have tried to, and governments have tried to control that. Yeah, Welsh, Cornish, etc. Thankfully, those languages have survived more or less, but it was definitely rough just here looking at the testimonies of people who got yeah, Gaelic survived, Welsh survived, Cornish survived. They all still exist. There are people who speak those languages, so yeah. But like hearing the stories of people getting bullied by their own teachers for speaking a language, um, that's not English. It's just really hard to like learn about, but it's true. It's what happened. And definitely not acceptable, but also like expected from like governments who want complete control. An interesting thing about English too, that I've talked about with some other people, is that with the English government, when they were like colonizing places, they didn't really like do that in other places. Like they don't like you can only speak English. Like in India, for instance, they don't like force English on the people, but the closer you are to England, the more like harmful it is. And not to minimize what happened in India, especially what happened with the Burmese during World War II. But like, if you, it's it was more methodical and more cruel in other areas that are closer to them because like because they're more scared of what the people close to them can do. Because like in India, it's like okay, if something happens, we can just pull out. But like with Scotland and Wales, it's like no, we have to have like a chokehold over these countries, and it's still kind of an issue today. So I don't know whatever your opinion is about Scottish independence. It's just that chokehold is still kind of a concept right now. Language is how Lithuania survived the Russification. Yep. Yes, that's another thing too. I think Lithuania and all the other Baltic countries have been able to preserve their language. Belarus, not so much. The Belarusian language is still kind of there, but it's more or less been kind of Russified a lot, which I've also learned by studying with looking into the Belarusian stuff. And there's no Belarusian dub. They just distribute the Russian dub in Belarus. There's a Ukrainian dub, there's Latvian dub, there's Lithuanian dub, but there's no Belarusian dub. They just dub it in Russian and then distribute the movie. So yeah, that's the tea. What am I doing? I'm just running around the island. I think I'm gonna turn it back to English. That's Poppy's name. Her name's kind of cute. That sounds like a historical drama name of a maidservant. She's talking about laundry. Okay, I made a maidservant joke, but you don't need to talk about laundry. Felicity's name's Aiding. Is KK still KK? Yes. I don't know how the songs are in Korean, so I'm gonna have to change back to English before I request songs. Yeah, I don't like her name Bouquet, at all. She likes my shoes. Recommendations for language learning. I mean, a lot of it's perseverance. So, part of it, I know one of my friend in Canada often says it too, that when you want to learn a language, you gotta find someone who can help you practice speaking it, someone supportive, of course. I mean, someone who's willing to tell you, correct you and stuff, but, isn't gonna, laugh too much at you and stuff, Languages or programs. Programs, I mean, when I used to have time, I've used Duolingo, and I think Duolingo is still pretty good. And I've also used Hello Talk, which is a chat app that lets you chat in foreign languages with people that actually natively speak the language. I will say though, last time I used Hello Talk, there wasn't super good security as far as spam messages and weird stuff happening in the chats. So I'm gonna recommend it if you're an adult who's familiar with navigating the online space and knowing how to keep yourself safe. But if you want to help, if you want practice, speaking in a different language, or in this case, texting a different language regularly with someone under an anonymous name, I recommend using that as well. Duolingo, I mean, I actually like Duolingo though. I mean, it's kind of it kind of just, I guess it's not a magic tool though. I didn't mind using it when I used it. But I guess at the same time, me not using it anymore kind of shows that's not that effective. I don't know, but when I used it was fine. A lot of people also use Rosetta Stone, but that's when you're being really bougie and want to invest in something. But yeah, I don't know. One thing I really do recommend is immersing yourself in the language. So I'm watching media that's done in that language, or listening to music that's sung in that language. And it's not gonna help you learn in an active way, but that's a good way of passively learning stuff. And I think but that only works if you have some level of familiarity with the language already. So if you've already taken a formal class in it, or if you already know a language that's similar to it, I would recommend doing that too. So I've watched Miraculous Ladybug in French, and it's helped me develop my French brain, and keep retain the vocabulary that I've learned, as well as pick up new vocabulary because I actually couldn't understand it. if you have zero experience knowing French or Romance languages at all, I wouldn't recommend that because it's like, oh, okay, yeah. Because when I did Duolingo with like Spanish, it's fine. I guess like a lot of the language apps work best with Spanish because they work really hard to make it as accurate as possible. But everything else is kind of just um. But yeah, you have to have some level of like familiarity with it though to like appreciate the media. Oh, that's good. When I was senior studying in the 1960s in the kind of academic decathlon, I pronounced JFK's famous quote about Berlin, and I was told I pronounced the German well. And I'm studying the German rock band, by the way. Oh, that's cool. So yeah, I watched it in I watched Miraculous Ladybug in French, and because I already took French before, it was good for me. And I watched like Korean dramas, of course, like I said before, and K-pop music because I'm already familiar with Korean, so it's just expanding my vocabulary that way. And then I do watch anime, and there's like this funny thing about like weebs who like learn Japanese through anime. Please don't think you can learn Japanese through anime. It's not how it works. But for me, since there is some overlap with Japanese and Korean, so it was very interesting to learn some of the overlapping words and vocabulary, and it's been an interesting experience. But if you want to learn Japanese formally, I would recommend like using programs. But I never really tried to program for Japanese, so I don't have a recommendation for that. I will say with like Chinese characters and stuff, I've used and for some of you who know Korean already, there's like the Naver dictionary. I think you might already know about that, but I've used that a lot for Chinese characters. Also, I've also used Wiktionary a lot. Wiktionary isn't, super reliable or anything, but it's a good starting point. So if you want to know vocabulary and stuff, Wiktionary has a lot of good stuff. If you know what to look up, of course. So I've used Wiktionary a lot too. Well, I mean, that person just came to like pick up something. Some of the only Chinese characters I know are the ones that make up my name. Yeah. Oh, another way of learning Chinese characters is there's a very famous poem that is made of 1,000 Chinese characters, and there's an interesting story behind it as well. But that's another way of learning the basic Chinese characters. It's a good tool because it's like a good structure, and it's basically made of I think 250. What's 1,000 divided by 4? Was it 250? 250 sentences, four character sentences, and so it's a very good way of learning more Chinese characters, a lot of basic Chinese characters that like are good for just basic knowledge. So I've used that. I won't be honest and say I don't know all 1,000, but I know a good deal of them, and it's been very helpful for me just to know basics. So yeah, it's called Chunjamun in Korean, but you can just look it up as 1,000 character poem and you'll probably find it. And I think there's like resources in English as well, though I've only really used the ones that are in Korean. But you can learn those Chinese characters. Interesting thing too, I will say, is that in Korea and I think Taiwan, they still use traditional characters, and I feel like traditional characters capture the history and meaning more than the simplified do. But at the same time, though, if you don't learn to simplify, it's kind of hard to like. If you only learn a traditional, it's kind of hard to figure out what the simplified is. So I feel like I don't have a recommendation for which one to know. Like I think it depends on what you want to study. So if you want to study Korean, or if you want to study Taiwanese, I think, or just learn about Chinese languages, historically, traditional characters are more, I recommend that. But if you want to like learn Chinese or learn Japanese with the kanji, then just use the characters that they use. And I will say kanji is a little deceptive because kanji uses Chinese characters, but the Japanese also added their own definitions and their own ways of interpreting characters, and so that's its own thing too, technically. Yeah, Simplified was a Mao Zedong creation. I have my own opinions about the political stuff of, you know, Simplified and traditional, but from a language learning perspective, want to learn, mainland Mandarin Chinese, Simplified is more useful. They want me to make a snowman, but I'm not gonna do it. Yeah. Okay, based on Chloe's story about the guy who knows his Hanja very well, I think it's better to learn traditional. I think you can still kind of figure out what the simplified is based off of the traditional, more so than the other way around. But that's pretty much all I will say about Chinese characters. Simplified Chinese was actually suggested in 1909 by modernists. I've seen modernists and I just groan. My opinions about modern movements are just really bad. Very negative. Oh, great. Oh, guys, have any of you watched my video on Cyrillic? Because I thought that was very interesting. And once figuring out that Cyrillic is based off of, and the Kuomintang also considered it to increase literacy. I mean, I don't know if it does though. I mean, like it has the same effect as Hangul. As much as I love Hangul, like you learn Hangul and you can like read it, but at the same time, you don't. Like you're still not as educated as someone who knows Hanja. You know what I mean? Like you can read the Korean script, but if you don't know the the Chinese characters, the Hanja, you're still more ignorant than someone who does know it. So it's like, yeah, there's literacy, but at the same time, it's like you're not as informed about the language. It's a mixed bag. But they're still gonna be. You're not gonna level the playing field. It's still gonna be the people who are elite are still gonna know more than you. Basically, is what I'm saying. Which I did talk about in the Hangul video too. It's like the nobles got, well, not really nobles, but the scholars got freaked out over the king making Hangul. But eventually it just became part of Korean culture, and but at the same time didn't really end this class divide because people, the young ones were still people who knew the Chinese characters, and the common people knew only the Hangul. So it's like, okay. Also, simplified characters in the form of Kaoshu cursive writing dates back to the Qin dynasty. Okay, I mean, I guess it's similar to Egyptian, which I did talk about the hieroglyphs in one of my videos, where they have the really fancy hieroglyphs. They eventually just left it to formal events, and then they had their own shorthand. So I guess the simplified characters is kind of a shorthand in a way. I'm just like running around my island. What should I do next? There's Russian. I don't do that though. Let's do French. Just for kicks and giggles. The textbooks we used had both, which is good. That's good. Cobalt said. It's still called Animal Crossing in French. Yeah, I've noticed a lot of characters. Yeah, it's the thing. They have less strokes. So like even there is one though. There's some characters that are not simplified at all. So like I think the character for Korea, I think Guk is still simplified, but like Han in Hanguk or Hangul isn't simplified at all. It's just literally the same. It's very complicated. It's very hard to write. Les paramètres de langue ont été modifiés depuis la dernière fois que tu as joué. So, le nombre de personnages et certains éléments d'interface peuvent différer d'un l'un à l'autre. Continuez? Oui. I did not use tones correctly for Hangul, but I don't really know what the tones are. I've never studied Chinese. My sister studied Chinese, but I didn't. Oh, it's Blair and Marshall. I forgot what Marshall's name was in French, but he has a different name in French too. Which I think is more interesting. How like even in like in Europe, a lot of the names are different. That is what I think is interesting. What's Poppy's name in French? Oh, Irene or Irene. Irene, I think would be how it's pronounced. They call it l'Académie des Joyeux Décorateurs instead of Happy Home Academy. Did I just sing? Yes. Just I have no idea what she said. And I need to work on my French vocabulary. Okay, that's another way of learning languages. You go to your Animal Crossing and you change the language mode, and you listen to read what they say. And if you don't know what a word means, you look it up. And that's how you amass 1,000 hours in your game just from translating. What's Tom? Is he still Tom Nook? Yes, he is. Bonjour, bonjour. I know what he says here. Welcome to the construction consultation place. What can I do for you? Yeah, that's what he said. Je dois faire quoi? What must I do? À propos de ma maison. Parlons infrastructure. Ça ira, merci. I have no idea what ça ira means. Isabel. Apparently, Isabel's a Shih Tzu. I think one of you said that. I did not connect that at all. She just looks like a yellow dog with a weird look. Changeons l'hymne, changeons le drapeau. Problème de voisinage. Rien de spécial. There's nothing special. Okay. La réputation de l'île. I don't want to know. Yeah, it's probably like 3 stars. It's 4 stars! What? I thought it would be like 3. It's really so cute in French. Like, notre île est en excellente position dans plusieurs classements des meilleures destinations touristiques. Laissez-moi vous lire l'un des commentaires que je ressemble. L'île de la beauté. Les pieds qui connaissent la valeur d'un bon tapis. La visite m'apporte du plaisir. Fin de citation. Une remarque qui revient souvent est que l'île manque de paysages mémorables. Okay, I'm probably pronouncing like half of these words wrong, so if you know, just tell me. Je pense qu'il n'y a qu'une seule façon de remédier à ce problème. Décorer l'île de fond en comble, ou plutôt de falaises en plage. Je pense que vous pourriez créer de jolis paysages en plaçant quelques clôtures ici ou là. Vous devriez essayer. Et voilà, la prochaine fois que vous voulez connaître la réputation de l'île, n'hésitez pas à me demander. Y a-t-il autre chose que je puisse faire pour vous? Why am I saying pourquoi? Pour vous? Rien de spécial. Très bien, si vous avez besoin de quoi que ce soit par la suite, n'hésitez pas, surtout. That's cute. Oh yeah, another thing. If you know Korean or especially Chinese, you can write a lot more longer tweets. I mean, it's not as like effective anymore because like they've extended the tweet length limit to pretty long. I think 280 characters now, so that's a lot. But when it was back to when it was like 140 characters, it was still kind of a struggle to put a complete thought in English. But though it's still possible. I can't imagine doing it in French because look at what Isabel was saying to me. Like, that was like a really long sentences, and I'm like, in English it would have been a lot shorter. But with like Chinese and even like Korean sometimes, not so much Japanese because Japanese has a lot of different like particles and stuff. But in Chinese you could definitely fit a lot into 140 characters. So yeah, those Chinese tweeters are just like, yep, I'm gonna fit in all that I want to say in one tweet, and it's fine. In English, it's like multiple threads, and in French, it's even longer threads. Oh, I should talk with Raymond. I think he's called Jackson in Korean and Japanese, but I don't know what he's called in French. Is he at home? Yes, he is, because he was smoking a chimney. Like he's speaking in Espanol. Buongiorno, cara mia. Tu te demandes comment j'ai appris à parler espagnol, pas vrai? C'est ce qui arrive quand de passer ton temps à discuter avec tes fans pendant tes tournées mondiales. What did he just tell me? I remember he was like talking about something about fans and speaking Spanish. What are you making? Excellente question. Sous très dur abeille, je suis en train de fabriquer un mort par le vin d'or. L'inspiration m'est venue d'un rêve délirant dont j'étais le valeureux héros. Notre nuit. Yeah, Beyond Juno is Italian. I was like, that's not Spanish. But he said he was speaking Spanish though, in Espanol. But the thing about the smug villagers, as you noticed with what I posted with Marshall, is that they don't really correctly match the language that they speak with the actual language that they spoke. So if you noticed, I think it was uh, a Marshall that said, what's it? Oh, the Guten Tag, right? Guten Tag. And he said this is good tag in French. Uh, and I'm like, no, Marshall, it's good day in German. What are you saying? So yeah, I think Raymond is doing a little bit of that when he says buongiorno, buongiorno, and then speaks says he's speaking Spanish. The wall of I don't a green wall, is that what he's saying that I'm making? I do know all the DIYs though. It's like a quirk that they have. But I think it's kind of cute, but it's also like, dude, no. Okay, I'm gonna save and probably change language back to English. And I'm probably gonna end the stream in about 10 minutes, so at 5 o'clock I'll end the stream. But what else is there for me to say? I mean, I think there's another interesting thing about language learning that I don't know what the solution to it is that when you learn it as English speaking anime spouse, when you learn it as a child, right, you learn speaking first generally. And thinking about being a child is that when you make mistakes, it's like, I guess some people might still laugh because it's funny, but like as a child too, you're not really as like, I guess when you're really, really young, like when you're 2 years old, and starting to speak, you don't really register that people are laughing either, so it's not like you're, have a, sense of pride or like, shame or anything either, so you're just learning language. And that's that. And when you're learning a language when you're older than being a toddler, a baby, you're more sensitive to that. Like you don't want to make a mistake, and it's kind of you're kind of shy about speaking aloud a new language. And not only that, like oftentimes you learn how to read and write the language first. A lot of classes, so you learn a lot of grammar and whatever, and it's like hard to. And I just wonder, like, wouldn't it be better to, like, learn how to do speaking first? Because that's literally how our brains are wired to learn languages. But maybe not, because we're older now. But, I think part of it, I feel like, is both the learner's willingness to make mistakes and, be embarrassed at times if that happens. And, like, grow from those mistakes. So, like, don't be afraid to make mistakes. It's one of my, recommendations as well. It's like when you're learning vocabulary and you feel like it kind of like just embrace the fact that you're gonna kind of be a baby again, because like you're gonna speak broken sentences, you're gonna like piece words together incorrectly in the grammatical sense to get your message across, and that should be fine. And you should be, and if you really want to learn the language, you need to like get over the whatever embarrassment you have from that and just move past it, because that's kind of what language learning is all about. But at the same time, I kind of wish that classes were like more aware of like sometimes teaching reading and writing first isn't very conducive to learning how to speak fluently. I mean, I'm kind of mixed about it too. Cause I remember when I was in college, you would come in first day of class, not so much the one-on-one class. Ever after that, it's like the professor would sometimes, especially in some classes, they would like really insist on speaking like the language and nothing else, and they will not speak anything else, and it kind of feels, you know, difficult. So I guess there's like some negatives to it, but at the same time, it's like, how else are you gonna learn the language though if you don't get, thrown into the pool to learn how to swim? So the immersion is important, and I feel like your brain feels more. I guess you just have to be ready to do it and ready to embrace like learning it. That's in English speaking in animes and dramas. For me, some animes are better and some others have really good dubs. Talia, Fairy Tail, Ouran High School. I mean, Ouran High School Host Club is one of those rare animes where you get this pretty similar experience whether it's in dub or sub. I like both pretty equally, and at the end of the day, I didn't feel like there was a huge difference compared to some other stuff. Like Hatalia is a very, 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 very big difference. As much as I enjoyed the Hatalia dub, a lot of the jokes and stuff that's in there is not in the original, and so it's like you gotta remember that. Yeah, it's like really funny, and I think Himaruya still approves of it because it's not like he doesn't know English. He like lived in America for quite a while. But like it's just like in the original concept, it wasn't necessarily as dirty or as like gay. Not that there's anything wrong with being gay, but it's not as like overtly sexual as it is in the dub. So like I think one example of that is the paint and white thing, where it talks about like how France and England are like a kind of a thing. It kind of hints at that in the movie, and like that's in the English dub. It's not in the sub. So like just like take all the greater stuff, especially with like what's canon and what's not. There's a debate whether or not you should take the dub into account or whether you should take the sub. And of course, there's like a lot of drama right now about Funimation like basically rewriting animes to fit their own agenda, like what they want to say into the show, and it's not necessarily in the original, script in Japanese. So like there's a lot of drama about that, which I won't get into too much about. But yeah, that's that. But Ouran High School Host Club is definitely one of those rare animes where you can really get this similar experience whether you watch it in dub or watch it in sub. So, and speaking specifically of moments when English is spoken in Japanese version, yeah, I mean, that's one thing too that I was like, mixed about when watching animes, where you go like, well, I mean, they are in Japan for most of it, but yeah, it's very different with the subs. Like, I love the sub too, especially like if you want to get a more accurate picture of like Austria, for instance. Yeah, he's hilarious in the dub, but like, why did you weren't really necessarily like Austria in the dub? He's just kind of like a Weezer geezing old geezer guy. But like in sub, he's like he has a very attractive mellifluous voice, and you go like, okay, that's why people have a crush on Austria, because he has a pretty cool character in the sub, but in the dub it's like voice. So I think it's pretty cool, although sometimes it's hard to understand because the accents. Not that I can talk much about it. My pronunciation is horrible. Yeah, the Japanese in English and Japanese anime. I mean, it's funny, especially when the characters supposed to have lived in America for like X amount of years, and it should be like, as far as canon is concerned, it's fairly fluent. But then when they actually speak it in the anime, it's like, what are they saying? And I feel like it's gotten better though. I feel like it, especially like I don't know about anime, but like in K dramas, for instance, it's definitely gotten a lot better. Like there's like people who speak like English like they've been born and raised in America, like whatever. So that's definitely improved in the K drama scene, but I don't know about anime. I feel like it's more or less the same, and part of it is because like if you look at the statistics, there's really not that many exchange students from Japan going to America. Like there's only like one or two per year. And like in Korea, it's like hundreds of Koreans or even thousands of Korean students going to the States for college. So yeah, it's just different. And then it's hard not to laugh and watch this movie. Yeah, I mean, one example is Kuroko no Basket, which I am a big fan of the anime, and I'm so glad there's no dub version actually, because there is no way they can like live up to the level that's the voice acting that's in that anime. It's so good, and there's like really big stars in that anime as well, like Daisuke Ono and Hiroshi Gamiya, and it's like there's no like English, especially like the small pool of dub actors that are right around, which they're still very talented, but I'm just like they won't be able to live up to the image that I have from the original. So that's that for me, and yeah, but then when they speak English in that show, it's like, what in the world is going on? I thought they were raised in America. Especially like Himuro and Kagami, I think are their names. They cannot speak English. It's fine, but it's like, why? Okay, how am I gonna get the snowball without like destroying it? But I feel like some people are pretty good at it though. Like I feel like Mamoru Miyano is very good at doing English lines, French lines, Italian lines. He's pretty good. I mean, he's not perfect, but he's still pretty good. Like when he was Shuskiyama, pretty on point. Ooh. Let's see if I can make a perfect snowboy. Also, did I even change the language? I think I just saved it and then didn't change the language back. Let's see. I think it's still in French. Because I am a ditz. Yes, he voiced Tamaki. Okay, this thing needs to be a little bit bigger, I think. Actually, no, I don't think so. I think it's right. I think it's parfait. T'as réussi. Let's see if I know what he's saying. C'est presque trop beau pour être vrai. Tu es parfait, mon amour. Okay, so I didn't make a perfect snowboy. He said I made it. La couleur, parfait. La balance, parfait. La grosseur, parfait aussi. Je suis le seul bonhomme de neige. Dans le milieu événement, on dresse. Okay, it's 5 o'clock, so I need to end soon. But I'm gonna end on me making a perfect snowboy. J'aime brailler presque tellement, je suis content. Répondre à Yetati. Blah 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 blah. Alright, I'm gonna end stream here. Thank you for sitting with me and talking about languages with me. And I will see you maybe probably next week. We'll see. I do have a lot of tests coming up. But if it's not next week, it'll be the week after. And hopefully I'll get some multi-language song videos, one video at least out before then. So just cross your fingers that hopefully I'll get that done. And so yeah, thank you for being at the stream, and have a good rest of your weekend and a good next week. And that's it. Right, and I'm so glad I made a perfect snowman before closing the stream.